The valley remembers. The air still carries the scent of mint and morning. Amira walks where silence once spoke louder than words, her shawl catching the same light that once touched Arjun's face. Between the leaves and the wind, memory stirs. Some promises don't need voices, they echo in the hills themselves. The China in autumn, Kashmir's great witness. Ancient, patient, unbothered by armies or arguments or the quiet catastrophe of two people sitting 12 feet apart under its canopy. Scene 1, 3 days later. Amira's morning, disrupted 750 words. 3 days. The number is specific because the specific matters, not a week, not a vague stretch of time softened by narrative distance. 3 days, which is long enough for the ordinary to begin reasserting itself, and not long enough for whatever happened in the walnut grove to become, fully, the past. 3 days is exactly the duration of a thing that is still happening while pretending to be over. Amira's mornings have a shape. They have had this shape for 3 years, which is to say, since Tariq. The shape is not rigid, not a military schedule. It is softer than that and more necessary. The way a riverbed is shaped by water over time, not designed, simply worn into place by the daily fact of life moving through it. She wakes before the light fully commits to the mountains. She washes her face. She makes the kawa, the saffron water coming to temperature, the cardamom and cinnamon measured without measuring, because the hands know after 3 years what 3 years of muscle memory knows. She pours Nanny Jan's cup first, then her own. She takes both cups to the low table by the window that looks east toward the mountains. She drinks while the mountains take the light. Then she goes to the embroidery frame. Then the day begins. This morning, she pours Nanny Jan's cup first. And then, reaching for her own cup, she picks up Nanny Jan's. She stands there for a moment with the wrong cup, looking at it as if it has done something surprising. She sets it down. She pours her own. She carries both cups to the table. She sits. The mountains are doing what they always do. She is sitting the way she always sits. Nothing has happened. She finishes her kawa. She goes to the embroidery frame before she has washed her face, which she does not do, which she has not done in 3 years, because the routine is a wall she builds every morning against the kind of carelessness that lets grief back in, and the first brick of that wall is always, wash your face, be present in your body, be a person in a body who is beginning a day. She sits at the frame. She reaches for the indigo thread she laid out yesterday. She had decided on indigo for the border, the particular decision of an artist working through a composition. The border had to be indigo, or the whole thing would tip, and she picks up the crimson. She looks at the crimson thread in her hand for a long moment. She sets it down. She picks up the indigo. She sets it down. She picks up the crimson again. She thinks about the word shukriya, the way he said it. She has been thinking about the way he said it since the walnut grove, and she knows she has been thinking about it, and she has not yet decided what to do with the knowing. The word itself is ordinary. Thank you. A courtesy. Anyone can learn it. She has met soldiers who know 3 words of Kashmiri, enough to give commands, not enough to give comfort. He used it to give comfort to a 9-year-old boy who had hurt himself and was frightened. He crouched down to the boy's level first. He said the boy's name. He said shukriya when the boy showed him where it hurt. Thank you for trusting me with that. And the boy's breathing changed. She had watched a 9-year-old's breathing change because of how a word was said. Not which word. How. She cannot stop thinking about this. The routine is a wall she builds every morning. This morning the wall has a gap in it, and the gap is shaped like the way a man crouches down to a child's eye level and says thank you in a language he learned carefully enough to mean it. She embroiders with the crimson thread. She is 2 hours in before she notices it was the wrong choice for the border. She does not change it. She goes to the market, not the weekly market, the daily vegetable stall where she stops every morning on the way back from dropping off the embroidery orders at the distribution shop on the lower road. She does not look for him. She would say this clearly if anyone asked. She is not looking for him. She is going to the market because she goes to the market every morning, and she needs tomatoes because Zainab has been eating more than usual lately, which is itself a small mercy, and tomatoes are what she needs. She walks the familiar road. She passes the familiar houses. She buys tomatoes from the familiar stall. She notices, in the way you notice the absence of a sound you did not know you were listening for, that he is not there. Not at the stall, not on the road, not anywhere on the walk. She is aware of noticing this. She holds the noticing still, looks at it for one flat second, and puts her money in the vendor's hand and takes her tomatoes. She gets home. She puts the tomatoes on the kitchen table with slightly more force than tomatoes require. From the doorway, Nanny Jan watches. Her hands folded at her waist, her eyes soft and entirely awake, her expression carrying the particular quality of a woman who has been watching people for 70-some years and has long since stopped being surprised by what they do when they think no one is looking. She says nothing. She goes back to her chair. Amira stares at the tomatoes on the table. Outside, the mountains hold their positions without comment, as they always have, as they always will. Scene 2. Rahul notices. Arjun's day, with Rahul, 850 words. The medical tent in the morning has its own particular quality of light, canvas filtered, a little yellow, arriving at the same angle every day regardless of what the mountains are doing outside. Arjun finds this reliable. He finds many things about the medical tent reliable, which is part of why he is good at working inside it. The supplies organized to the same system every morning, the intake log open on the left side of the table, the clean linens folded in the stack he replenishes each evening before he stops for the night. Reliability, here, is a form of care. He learned this from the doctor who pulled a chair up to his sister's bed. The doctor's reliability, always that chair, always that pause before speaking, was itself the first gesture of safety. His first consultation of the morning. Corporal Dinesh, stress fracture in the left foot. Third time Arjun has seen him for it. Third time he has told him rest is the only thing that will actually fix it. And Dinesh has the expression of a man who has heard the word rest and understood it as a personal insult. Arjun raps it again. He says, 7 days, Dinesh. Not 5. 7. Dinesh says, sir, I can walk fine. Arjun says, I know. That's the problem. He raps it with the particular deliberate firmness of a medic who is making a point through the bandage. Dinesh thanks him and limps out at a pace that suggests the 7-day instruction has already been rounded down to 3. Private Meta, chest cold. Arjun listens to his lungs front and back, the stethoscope doing its quiet work, and pronounces him viral, hydration, and rest. Report back in 4 days. Come back immediately if it worsens. Meta nods. He seems relieved simply to have been listened to. This is a thing Arjun has noticed. A significant part of what people need from a medic is the fact of being attended to. The treatment matters, but the attending matters first. Sergeant Bose. Headache for 3 days. Waved off as nothing. Finally here at the insistence of Rahul, who has the cheerful authoritarianism of a person who is technically subordinate, but has figured out how to make suggestions feel like orders. Arjun examines him. Mild ear infection, secondary pressure, simple to treat. He gives Bose the drops and the instructions, and Bose looks at him with the expression of a man who expected to be told the headache was nothing, and is now faintly embarrassed to be proven wrong. 3 days. Arjun says, not unkindly. Come sooner next time. Bose says, yes, sir. He will not come sooner next time. But the instruction stands regardless. Between consultations, Rahul leans against the supply table in the way he always leans against the supply table, at ease with himself in the precise manner of someone who has decided that the tension the army provides is sufficient and he will not be adding any of his own. He looks at Arjun with the particular expression he reserves for things he has already decided to comment on, a kind of watchful patience, the expression of a man waiting for the right beat. He says, you're quiet. Arjun says, I'm always quiet. Rahul says, you're quieter. There are degrees. Arjun says something non-committal, a sound that occupies the space where a response would go, ambiguous enough to end the subject if the other person lets it. Rahul does not let it. He returns to the supply inventory with an air of complete innocent industry. He checks things off his list. He lets 4 minutes pass. It's the posting, isn't it? He says. Not a question. An observation dressed as one. The way Rahul tends to deliver the things he's actually sure about. The valley gets to everyone eventually. The mountains watch you until you start watching back. Arjun says, that's very poetic. Rahul says, I was a literature student before this. Did I never tell you that? Arjun says, multiple times. Rahul grins. The open, uncomplicated grin of a person who is genuinely pleased rather than performing pleasure, and nods. Then you know I mean it. He goes quiet. He lets the silence settle for long enough that it almost becomes comfortable. Then, without changing his tone, without shifting his weight from the supply table, in exactly the same easy conversational register in which he had discussed ear infections and supply counts. The woman at the walnut grove. The one with the blue shawl. He pauses. Is that what's quiet about you? Arjun recaps the supply kit. He does this with more deliberate attention than the supply kit requires. The lid aligned, the latch tested, the thing set back in its exact position on the shelf. He says, there is no what's quiet about me. I'm fine. Rahul says, okay. After a measured silence, he adds, she was very pretty though. Arjun says, Rahul. One word, exactly calibrated. Not anger, not quite a warning. The verbal equivalent of a hand placed briefly on a shoulder to stop forward motion. Rahul raises both hands. I'm just noting, out loud, to myself, in the general direction of the supply shelf. He turns back to his list. Arjun turns back to his notes. The tent is quiet. The tent is quiet in a way that is different from before, because Rahul has done the thing that cannot be undone. He has named a shape. Not precisely, not in full, but enough. He has said the blue shawl out loud, and the blue shawl is now in the room, and the room has changed. Arjun works through the rest of the morning with the slightly cornered feeling of a person who was managing perfectly well, who had, in fact, been managing with considerable skill and intention, until someone asked the right question and the management became visible. He is thorough. He is attentive. He is genuinely present with each person who comes through the tent. He is also, simultaneously, somewhere else entirely. In a walnut grove. In the particular afternoon light of a valley that watches everything. Next to a woman in a pale blue shawl who said Shukriya back to him before she turned and walked away, and whose departure he did not watch, and which he has thought about every day since. He is so thoroughly fine that it has become its own kind of problem. Rahul, across the tent, does not look up from his inventory, but he smiles quietly at the shelf. Scene 3, Nanny Jan's knowing. The past enters, 950 words. Evening arrives in this valley with intention, not the abrupt switch of a city, but a long, deliberate conversation between the light and the mountains, the sun taking its time with the western peaks, the shadows moving east across the valley floor as if they have somewhere specific to be. The house by the stream fills with this particular evening quality, the lamp on the low table throwing a circle of warm gold, the rest of the room gathering into soft gray, the sound of Zainab in the kitchen, that eternal background sound, the constant of this house, the rhythm of her movements, a kind of ambient reassurance that she is still here, still present, still managing the ordinary architecture of survival. Amira is at the embroidery frame. The crimson border is nearly finished. She committed to it this morning, and she is not a person who reverses course without reason. Nanny Jan is in the low wooden chair she has occupied for 40 years, the chair worn to the exact shape of her, the armrests rubbed smooth at the precise spots where her hands rest when she is thinking. Her own needlework is in her lap. Her eyes no longer follow the pattern. They follow other things, things in the middle distance, things that do not exist in this room, but exist in the room of memory, which is where Nanny Jan increasingly spends a significant portion of her evenings. She begins talking, not to Amira, exactly, or not only to Amira, to the room, to the lamp, To the 40 years this chair has stood in this spot. She talks about the valley before. The market, she says, was different. She means the central market, the one that has existed in some form since before anyone in this room was born. Your grandfather would take me on Fridays. We went together, which people noticed, which was not entirely usual at the time. A husband and wife going to market together was its own kind of statement. He didn't care. He said, "If I am going to carry something heavy, I may as well have the best company while I do it." She pauses. Her needle moves through the cloth without her appearing to direct it. He always carried the heaviest basket, even when there was nothing particularly heavy in it. Just so he was carrying something. So he had a reason to walk beside me. A small silence. The lamp. The kitchen sounds. He built this house. She doesn't need to indicate which house. There is only ever one house when Nanny Jan speaks about it. The carved eaves on the front. He did those himself. He said a house announces itself from the eaves. He worked on them for 6 weeks after the walls were up. The walnut wood for the front door. He sourced it himself, 3 villages over, carried it back on a cart he borrowed, and did not entirely have permission to borrow. 2 summers it took him. 2 full summers, working in the evenings after everything else was done, because it was going to be the house that held everything. Her voice has the quality of water over stone, the words smoothed by the repetition of having lived with them for decades. He built the door frame 3 inches too tall. The corner of her mouth moves. He always said it was for when I stopped telling him to duck. She touches her needlework. Her fingers settle on it gently, not picking it up, just resting there. The way you rest a hand on the shoulder of someone you love. Presence without demand. Then, without transition, without clearing her throat, without any of the announcements a lesser speaker would make before saying the important thing, she says. When you look at a person and you feel the valley shift inside you, that is either love or danger. She does not look up from her needlework. In this place, Amira, they are often the same thing. They have always been the same thing. Amira says, Nanny January. There is a warning in it. A soft warning, not hard. The warning you give to someone you love when you need them to not say the thing they are about to say. The old woman does not stop. I am not saying anything is happening, Nanny Jan says. I am saying that I am old and I have watched you for 26 years, and I know the difference between how you sit when the world is ordinary and how you sit when the world has rearranged itself slightly. She looks up. Her eyes are clear and without accusation, which is, in its way, more unsettling than accusation, because accusation would give Amira something to push against, and clarity gives her nothing. I'm not asking you anything. I'm telling you something. She returns to her needlework. The lamp flickers once, settles. The valley watches. So does the family next door. So does the woman at the fruit stall who has never minded her own business in 60 years. A pause, and then, deliberately. And so do I. Not as a threat. As a grandmother who has watched this valley eat people who did not pay attention to what it was watching. The kitchen sounds. The lamp. The embroidery frames. Both of them, moving and still, crimson thread, and the pattern Nanny Jan has been working since the autumn before last. Amira stares at the cloth in front of her. She says, very quietly, into the lamplight, there is nothing to watch. Nanny Jan says, good. Then, the walnut motif shawl you sold last Thursday, did she want to? Back to ordinary. Back to the market inventory, the count of shawls sold and orders pending, the mundane arithmetic of the embroidery business. As if the other thing was never said. Except it was said, and the room knows it was said, and the smoke from a blown-out match does not unexist simply because the match is no longer burning. It sits in the air between them, dispersing, slowly, but present. Impossible to pretend otherwise. Amira answers the question about the shawl. Her voice is steady. Her hands on the embroidery frame are steady. She is, by any observable measure, perfectly fine. The crimson border grows. Nanny Jan's needle moves. Outside, the stream runs past the house as it has always run, as it will run after everyone in this room is gone, with the particular patience of moving water that has agreed to keep going regardless. Scene 4. The Herb Garden. The second meeting 1050 words. The herb garden on the slope above the village is not exactly a garden in the cultivated sense, more an agreement between the hillside and the things that grow on it. Mint runs in dark clusters along the lower edge where the soil holds moisture from the stream. Wild thyme spreads low and persistent over the flat rocks, its small leaves releasing fragrance underfoot the moment anything disturbs them. The scent of it so immediate and particular that it has become for Amira the specific smell of this place, the smell of being here, of coming here, of this particular hillside in this particular valley. The saffron crocus beds are scattered between the stones in patterns that suggest intention without quite achieving it. Not blooming now, the season passed, but the leaves still reaching, still green, still present in the way of things that know they will bloom again. Below, somewhere, the stream. Above, the mountains taking the early afternoon light in the way they only take it at this hour, at an angle that turns ordinary gray stone into something a painter would genuinely beg to capture, the shadows falling in long, deliberate lines, the peaks catching illumination that the valley floor won't see for another 2 hours. The light here is a different country from the light in the village. Amira has known this since she was a girl and has never tried to explain it to anyone because it is not the kind of thing that benefits from explanation. She comes here for mint on the days when Zainab has trouble sleeping. Mint tea, the specific temperature, the steep time, the single cardamom pod, is the one thing that still reaches her mother in the place where she has partly retreated since Tariq. Not heals, reaches. There is a distinction. Amira does not collapse. She comes to the herb garden and she cuts mint and she makes tea and her mother holds the cup in both hands and sometimes, for an hour or so, the world is soft enough to sleep in. This is what is possible. Amira has made a life inside what is possible. She is crouching over the mint, the small knife moving through the stems with a clean efficiency that comes from years of doing this exact thing, when she hears footsteps on the upper path. She does not startle. She is a person who registers approaching presence quickly and assesses it without showing she is assessing. This is not paranoia. It is geography. It is living in a valley where vigilance has practical applications. Her body takes the information and sorts it. Pace, weight, the sound of boots on stone. She has the answer before she sees him. She knows who it is before he comes around the curve of the path and stops. Arjun. Alone. He had been given 2 hours of off-duty time by Major Sharma, an occasional practice, because Sharma understands what permanent tension does to a unit's long-term effectiveness, and because a good commanding officer knows that men who never rest become men who make mistakes. Arjun had walked without a specific destination, which is its own kind of destination, the path that goes uphill, the mountain air, the particular quality of an afternoon in which nothing is required of you for 2 hours. He comes around the curve and stops. He sees her. They look at each other. The garden between them. The mountain above. The stream below. The mint she is holding, cut and gathered, still fragrant in her hand. The valley holds very still, the way the valley holds still when it is paying attention, which is the valley's particular disposition toward the events that take place inside it. He says, I didn't. She says, you didn't. Neither of them finishes the sentence. Neither needs to. He did not follow her here. She knows he did not follow her here. This is the valley. The valley places people where it places them. The valley has always done this, long before there were armies in it, long before there were borders drawn through it. Long before anyone thought to ask the valley's permission for any of the things done on and inside and across it. He says, I'll go another way. She looks at him for a single second. She does not say yes. She does not say no. She turns back to the mint. He does not go another way. He moves off the path, careful, deliberate, and sits on a flat rock approximately 10 feet from where she crouches. He angles himself toward the mountains, not toward her. This detail matters. His back is not turned, but he is not facing her either, his body oriented toward the open view of the valley and the peaks, present but not enclosing, there but not positioned between her and the world. He looks at the mountains. She looks at the mint. The 10 feet of wild thyme and scattered crocus between them is its own kind of conversation, saying nothing specific, meaning a great deal. A bird calls from somewhere in the rocks above, a sound she knows the name of in Kashmiri, a name her grandmother taught her when she was 6, a name she has never had occasion to offer to anyone in a language they might share. The bird calls twice and is silent. After a moment, "The mint, for tea?" She says, "For my mother." It helps her sleep. He says, "I'm sorry," about whatever it is that keeps her from sleeping. She pauses in her cutting. The knife is still. Her hands are still. She turns and looks at him. The first real look she has given him when she isn't already in the act of leaving. The first look that is not a glance or an assessment or a controlled disclosure. She looks at him and he meets it without performance, without looking away, without the slightly too eager expression of a person trying to demonstrate that they are trustworthy. He simply looks back. She says, "You don't know what it is." He says, "No, but I know it's something large. The way you said my mother, it carries something." She holds the mint in both hands. She looks at it. She says, "She lost someone 3 years ago." He says, "I'm sorry." She says, "You don't know enough to be sorry." He says, "I'm sorry that it happened. I don't need to know the details to be sorry that it happened." She says, "You said that already." He says, "I meant it both times." She turns back to the herbs. Her knife begins moving again. He looks at the mountains. The wind comes down off the peaks in a single long breath and passes through the thyme and the mint and lifts the loose strands at the edge of her braid and is gone. She says, "You should go." He says, "I know." He doesn't go. Not immediately. He stays on the flat rock and looks at the mountains, and she stays crouching over the mint and cuts 2 more handfuls, and neither of them speaks again for 2 full minutes. Write those 2 minutes as they are. The stream below, the wind-touched time, a second bird briefly joining the first, and then departing, the mountain light shifting by some small angle that only the mountains notice. 2 people in the same small garden on the same hillside in the same afternoon, making a choice that is not precisely a choice because neither of them has articulated an alternative and neither of them is moving toward one. 2 people being, simply, present in the same place, without having agreed to it, without it being named, without either of them knowing what to call the fact of being here together in the mint and the time and the September light. Then he stands. He brushes time from his sleeve. He says, "I hope the tea helps." She doesn't answer. He leaves by the upper path, his footsteps receding on the stone, growing smaller, and then gone. She stays crouched in the herb garden for a long time after his footsteps have faded completely. The mint is gathered. There is nothing left to cut. The knife is in her hand, and the mountain is in front of her, and the wind is doing what the wind does, and the valley has gone back to its ordinary business, as if nothing has occurred inside it, which is, Amira has noticed, a habit of the valley, to receive extraordinary things and return immediately to the ordinary, as if it cannot afford to acknowledge everything it has seen, and so has chosen to acknowledge nothing at all. She doesn't move for a long time. The mint smells of everything she came here for. She holds it in both hands. She looks at the place on the path where he was, and then is not, and is still not. Scene 5. Amira's confession to no one. Internal reckoning, 750 words. She makes the tea when she gets home. She is very deliberate about it. The water brought to temperature, not boiling. The mint added at the right moment. The steep time not by the clock, but by the visual. the color reaching exactly the right depth of green before the cardamom pod goes in. One pod, the way her mother has always taken it. She learned this from watching, not from being told, because Zainab is not a woman who gives instructions for her own care. You have to learn her by watching. Amira has been watching for 26 years, and she knows this tea the way she knows embroidery, not as a recipe, as a conversation. She carries the cup to where Zainab sits by the window. The west-facing window, the one that holds the last light of a Kashmir afternoon the longest. Zainab's hands come up automatically, both hands, the cup taken in both, held at chest height, the warmth of it received before the taste. She doesn't look at Amira. She looks at the mountains through the glass. She looks at them with an expression that has no clear name. Not grief. Exactly. Because grief is active, and this is something past its active phase, something that has settled into the body the way a long illness settles. Unremarkable now in its presence, simply a condition of being. Amira sits in the chair beside her, the chair that is always beside her. They watch the mountains together in the particular silence of two people who have already said everything there is to say about certain things and have agreed, without ever discussing the agreement, never to say them again. Tariq's name is in this room the way the carved eaves are on the front of the house, structurally present, impossible to remove, part of the architecture of everything. Nobody says it. Nobody needs to. She is not confused, Amira thinks. She is not pretending to herself that what she felt in the herb garden was neutral. What she felt in the herb garden was not neutral, and she has stopped pretending it was neutral because she is, at her core, a person who prefers precision to comfort, and precision requires the correct word even when the correct word is inconvenient. What she felt in the herb garden was, she is looking for the word, the honest word, the word that is accurate without being dramatic. She felt seen. He said, "The way you said my mother, it carries something." He heard the weight in 2 words. In 2 words. And he did not demand to know what the weight was. He did not say, "You can tell me," or "I want to understand," or any of the things people say when they want you to give them the thing they've just noticed you carrying. He simply named it. He said, "It carries something." And then he said he was sorry. And then he meant it again when she pointed out he'd said it already. She thinks, what do you do with a feeling that has nowhere to go? Not as a question. She has stopped asking it as a question because questions imply answers, and she is not looking for an answer. She is stating geography. This feeling lives in her. It has no legal residence anywhere outside her. It cannot. She knows the cost, not abstractly, not theoretically, the way you know the cost of something you've read about. She knows the cost the way her mother knows it, the way Nanny Jan knows it, the way the valley knows it. In the body, in the permanent present tense of it, in the way the world restructures itself around a loss, and you spend the rest of your life navigating the new structure. She knows what Nanny Jan said. She knows what the valley says. She knows what the family next door says, and what the woman at the fruit stall has never stopped saying. She knows all of this. She reaches over and takes her mother's hand. Zainab lets her. Her fingers close around Amira's without looking away from the mountains. Outside, the light is doing what it does this time of day. The long, slow change of a Kashmir afternoon becoming Kashmir evening. The mountains going from illuminated to dark incrementally. The valley floor receiving the shadow while the peaks still hold the gold. The whole thing unfolding with the patient grandeur of something that has been doing this every day since before anyone was here to watch it, and will continue doing it after. Neither of them moves until the tea is cold. The silver bird grows, unplanned, at the edge of the embroidery frame across the room, waiting for her to come back to it. Already mid-flight. Already between going and arriving. Scene 6. The commanding officer. Arjun receives a warning, 850 words. The next morning, 0900. Major Sharma's quarters are neat in the way that speaks of a particular disposition rather than a particular effort. The map of the district on the wall with its markings in 3 colors of ink. The desk clear except for a folded letter that Arjun notices and does not look at twice. The single lamp angled to illuminate working papers. The camp chair across from the desk pulled to a precise distance that is close enough for confidential conversation and far enough to remain official. Sharma is already seated when Arjun enters. He gestures to the chair with the small efficiency of a man who has given this gesture 10,000 times and has stripped it of everything unnecessary. He begins with routine. Supply requisitions for the medical tent. He has reviewed them and approved the main order, one item flagged for budget review. He says, "I'll push it through by Friday." Arjun says, "Thank you, sir." The scheduled health visit to 3 families in the upper village who have agreed to receive basic care. Confirmed for Thursday, Arjun and one accompanying private 3-hour window. Good work, getting those families to agree, Sharma says. It matters. He means this. He is not the kind of commanding officer who dispenses praise cheaply, which means that when he offers it, the recipient tends to receive it fully. Arjun receives it fully. Then, with no visible shift in tone, no clearing of the throat, no pause that would announce the change of subject as significant, Sharma says, "I've heard you're building some rapport with the locals." Arjun says, "I try to, sir. It's part of effective community medicine." He means this genuinely. He has always believed it genuinely. Sharma says, "Of course." A pause, measured, deliberate, a pause that knows exactly what it is doing. "I've heard specifically about the embroidery market and the herb path above the village." Beat. "The valley talks, Malhotra," he says. "It always has. That's not a criticism. I want you building trust with the community. That's good medicine, and it's good presence." The Army's relationship with this valley depends on individual interactions, and individual interactions depend on individual men who are genuinely present and not merely compliant. I know that. He folds his hands on the desk. What I'm saying is, be thoughtful about what kind of trust and with whom. He lets that sit. He is a man who knows when to let a sentence sit. Pause. Arjun says, "Understood, sir." His voice is professionally steady, not flat, not clipped, the steadiness of someone who has learned to receive difficult things without flinching and without performing composure, who has simply integrated composure into the baseline. Sharma looks at him for a moment. The look is not unkind. It is the look of a man who has been in difficult postings long enough to know that the men who are worth the most are exactly the ones most likely to get themselves into complicated situations, because they are the ones most likely to care about something. He says, "You're a good medic, Arjun. Better than good. I want to keep you here, where you're doing good work. That requires keeping everything clean." The word clean enters the room and hangs in the altitude of it. It is the right word in the precise way that only the wrong word can be the right word. Precise enough to mean everything without saying it, clean enough to be deniable, specific enough to be impossible to misunderstand. Breath. Arjun says, "Yes, sir." Sharma gives a small nod, the nod of a man who has said what he needed to say and does not need to say it again. He returns to the papers on his desk. The conversation is over. Arjun stands, offers the correct gesture, turns, leaves. He is standing outside the tent in the mountain air. The air up here has a temperature and a quality at 0900 that it will not have again for the rest of the day. The specific cool and clarity of a morning that hasn't been breathed too many times yet. He stands in it. He breathes it in once, and out, and looks at the mountains, which are doing what the mountains do. Major Sharma is not wrong. He is not wrong about any of it. The valley watches. Amira herself said as much, in different words, with different context, with the specific authority of a person who has been watched by this valley all her life. The gossip reaches places. An Indian army medic sitting in a herb garden with a Kashmiri woman whose family lost someone to the conflict. That story, in this valley, in this political climate, in the current year, does not resolve itself quietly. It does not end well for her. It does not end well for him. It does not end well for either family. He knows the shape of it. He has always known the shape of it. Major Sharma has just taken the shape and made it explicit, professionally, in a tone that was almost gentle, which is, he registers this. Worse than if it had not been gentle. A harsh warning can be argued with. A kind one sits in you differently. He stands in the mountain air and thinks, I know exactly what I should do. He goes back to the medical tent. He does his work. He is excellent at his work, all morning. Thorough, unhurried, present with every person who comes through, giving each of them the full attention that is the thing he most reliably offers the world. All morning, without interruption, without distraction. All morning, he does not think about the china tree at the edge of the village. He thinks about the china tree at the edge of the village. Scene 7. Under the china tree. The china, Platanus orientalis, is Kashmir's emblematic tree. Ancient specimens reach 30 meters, their canopies creating, as the script describes, their own weather. Kashmiris call the tree boon. It has stood through Mughal gardens, colonial surveys, partition, and conflict. The china does not take sides. This is either wisdom or the advantage of not being asked. The old china tree at the edge of the village is enormous in the specific way of things that have grown slowly for a very long time. Not the sudden enormity of ambition, but the accumulated enormity of endurance. Its bark is silver gray, furrowed, ancient. Its canopy spreads wide enough that on a warm afternoon it creates its own microclimate beneath. Cooler, stiller, a different quality of light filtered through the broad-lobed leaves, a different quality of sound in which the village below seems slightly further away than it is. The tree has been here through everything. Every army that has moved through this valley. Every argument between neighbors. Every marriage, every death, every child born into this village, and every family that packed and left it. It stands at the edge of the world with the patience of something that has agreed, by virtue of its nature, to simply outlast whatever happens to pass through. It does not comment. It simply stands. Amira comes here on Wednesday afternoons. She has done this since she was 15. Her specific place, her thinking place, the place where the embroidery patterns arrive to her whole and clear, the place where the noise of being careful goes quiet for an hour, and she can hear herself think in the original language of herself rather than in the translated language of getting through the day. She brings the sketchbook, a battered thing, soft cover. Every page that isn't blank is full of mountains and birds, and the particular curve of rooftops in the valley below, and the way light behaves on water in September, and the small tin of charcoal pencils her art teacher gave her when she was 17. Which she has replaced 3 times, but kept the tin because the tin is the tin. She is already sitting, already sketching, the charcoal moving over the page in the particular absorbed way of a person who has stopped thinking about the drawing and is simply making it, when Arjun comes down the road past the tree. He is carrying medical supplies from the camp to a distribution point 300 meters down the road. His colleague went ahead with the main kit. Arjun follows with the secondary pack, having taken a longer route without entirely meaning to, having found his feet on this road rather than the direct one, the feet making their own decisions while the mind was occupied elsewhere. He comes down the road. He sees the tree. He sees her under it. He stops. 3 seconds. They both know something about 3 seconds. He says, "May I?" He gestures to the open ground near the tree, not near her. Near the tree, toward the mountain view, toward the open air, not between her and the village. She says nothing. She does not say no. He moves off the road. He sits on the ground 12 feet from her, angled toward the mountains, the position of someone who is simultaneously present and not enclosing. The physical fact of him communicating, through posture, through the specific direction he faces. I am not advancing. I am simply here. He looks at the mountains. She looks at her sketchbook. The china above them receives the afternoon wind without comment. After a long silence, the wind in the canopy above them, the stream sound rising from below, a bird whose name she knows in Kashmiri moving somewhere in the high branches. She says, "You can ask. Whatever you're going to ask." He says, "I wasn't going to ask anything." She says, "You were deciding whether to." He considers this for a moment with the honesty of someone who doesn't argue with accurate observations. He says, "What are you drawing?" She tilts the sketchbook toward him, not handing it over, tilting it at an angle from where she sits, a controlled disclosure. He sees the mountain with a bird mid-flight, caught in the exact moment between going and arriving, neither here nor there, suspended in charcoal on the page with an accuracy that is not merely technical. He says, "You're an artist." She says, "I'm an embroiderer." This is just thinking out loud. He says, "I used to draw. Before." She says, "Before what?" He says, "Before this." A pause. Not the silence before conversation, the silence inside it, the kind that means something is being decided about how much further to go. She decides. She asks, "Why medicine? Why a medic?" He looks at the mountains for a moment before he answers. And when he answers the real question rather than the official one. He tells her about Priya, his younger sister. She was sick for years, he says, something the doctors kept misdiagnosing because they were looking at the tests and not at her, because she had become, in the progression of her illness through the medical system, a set of symptoms attached to a name rather than a person. She spent 2 years being frightened in hospitals by professionals who moved quickly and spoke over her and came in without sitting down. He says, there was one doctor who always sat down first. Before he said anything, he pulled the chair up, always, every time, and he sat down at her level and he asked her how she was doing like he was actually asking the question, not covering the base, actually asking. He says, she always calmed down when he came in, even when the news was hard, because she knew she was going to be looked at. He says, I wanted to be that. I wanted to be the kind of doctor who pulls the chair up. I'm not a doctor. There wasn't money for that. And then there was the army, and here we are. But the principle still works. You sit down. You ask. You wait for the actual answer. She says, is your sister okay now? He says, yes. She's studying medicine in Delhi. Pediatrics. She says she's going to pull chairs up. She has a list of things the doctors did wrong with her, and a corresponding list of things she's going to do differently. She showed it to me when I was last home. It was 4 pages. Something changes in his face at this. Not performance, not the demonstration of feeling, just the actual fact of it, visible briefly before he looks back at the mountains. She's going to be extraordinary. Amira looks at him. The smallest change in her face. Not a smile, but the precursor to one, the adjustment of expression that precedes allowance. He sees it. He does not comment. He does not make anything of it. He looks back at the mountains. She says, she sounds like someone worth becoming. He says, she already is. Neither of them plan what happens next, which is why it happens. She says, my brother wanted to be an architect. And then she stops. The sentence hangs in the mountain air, complete and incomplete, everything in the tense of it. The past tense wanted doing the work of the whole story in a single word. He hears the tense. He doesn't hurry past it. He doesn't fill the space she left. He waits. She says, he wanted to restore old houses. The ones with the carved eaves that people are letting fall down because it costs too much to maintain. He said if no one saved them, the valley would lose something it didn't know it was losing. She is looking at the china tree, not at him. Her charcoal pencil is still in her hand. He used to sketch them. Houses. He had notebooks full of houses, the carved door frames, the eaves, the window proportions, the way the old wood was cut differently from the new wood, and you could see it if you knew how to look. He was 22. The silence after this is not like the silences before it. It has shape. It has the shape of a loss, specific and irreversible, and it sits in the air under the china tree with the full weight of its 3 years. He does not rush it. He does not perform compassion. He says, I'm sorry. She says, don't be. You didn't do it. He says, very quietly, no. But someone wearing what I wear did. I know that. The air goes entirely still. This is the center of everything. The place where all of it sits. The conflict and the loss and the uniform and the valley and the two of them under this ancient, patient tree that has watched armies move through it for centuries and has never yet been asked what it thinks. He holds the look she gives him. He does not look away. He does not perform regret or apologize for existing or say the things that would make the moment smaller and more comfortable. He acknowledges the full weight of what he said and what it means and what it does not undo, and that he is saying it anyway, because not saying it would be a kind of lying he cannot do in good conscience in front of a woman who is sitting 12 feet away from him and has just told him about her brother's notebooks full of houses. She says, the China tree has stood through everything. Every army, every argument, every family that planted it, and every family that left. It doesn't take sides. He says, because it's a tree. She says, because it's wise enough not to. He says, I'd like to be the kind of person the valley doesn't have to fear. She looks at him for a long moment. The full look, the one she has been rationing, the one she has been giving only in controlled amounts and controlled directions, the look that is the actual measure of what she thinks. She says, that's a long way from where you're starting. He says, I know. He doesn't say, but I'm trying. He doesn't need to. She heard it. She closes the sketchbook. She gets up. He stands, not to stop her, not to delay, just because she stood and it would be wrong not to. She says, thank you for sitting. He says, thank you for not saying no. She doesn't answer. She adjusts her shawl, the pale blue catching the mountain wind as she turns, the fabric moving with a life of its own, and she walks back toward the village. He watches until the road curves and she disappears around it. He sits back down under the China tree. He does not follow her. He sits in the enormous quiet of the afternoon and the mountain and the ancient canopy above him, and he stays there for a long time. He thinks, I have done nothing wrong. He thinks, I have done everything wrong. He thinks, I don't know the difference anymore, and that itself is the answer. That itself is the thing Major Sharma was talking about. The not knowing the difference. That is where you are when you are already in something. The China tree stands above him. It has heard this conversation. It has heard 1,000 conversations before it. It will hear 1,000 more. It does not take sides. It stands. Scene 8. Two kinds of fire. Night. The valley goes dark with the absolute commitment of a place with no ambient light from any city larger than this village. The darkness here is real darkness, the kind that existed before electricity, the kind that makes the stars extraordinary. Under it, a house by the stream, a tent by the camp perimeter, 2 lit windows. The same hour. Amira's house. She is at the embroidery frame, the lamp throwing its familiar gold circle. The crimson border is finished now, completely finished, exactly right. The decision she made this morning vindicated by the thing it has become. She is working on something new tonight. The silver bird. She had not planned the silver bird. She came to the frame with a vague intention toward the center field of the shawl, the traditional floral element she has been planning for weeks, and then her hands reached for the silver thread, and she did not stop them. The bird is growing in silver from the outer edge of the crimson border, mid-flight, wings at the apex of their arc, the moment between beating and soaring. She watches her hands work. She thinks, he said Priya would pull chairs up. He said it the way you say something you have held close for a long time, and then set down in front of someone. Not performing pride. Just offering the fact of it, the simple fact of being proud of someone, of them already being what they're becoming. She thinks about Tariq, about his notebooks, the houses he was going to save. She had forgotten, for a long time, not forgotten, exactly, but stopped taking the notebooks out to look at them because the looking had been too much. She thinks, he named Tariq's work without knowing Tariq's name. He heard what it was, a plan, a vocation, a specific love for a specific thing, and he treated it as what it was. Not a detail of a tragedy, a person's life. She pulls silver thread through crimson cloth. She thinks, I am not falling in love with him. She thinks, I am simply someone who has not felt the valley shift inside her in 3 years, and today, both yesterday, the garden, and today, the tree, it shifted. I am noting that. I am noting it with precision. I am noting it the way you note a change in weather, because it matters for what you do next, not because you have any authority over it. She thinks, I am going to set this down. The silver bird grows under her hands. Breath. Arjun's tent. He writes his longest journal entry of the posting. He has a journal, a plain thing, brown cover, the kind sold at any camp supply depot, in which he writes irregularly when something needs to be put outside of him in order to be looked at properly. He has written 4 entries in 2 months. This is the 5th. It is longer than the first 4 combined. He writes about the China tree. He writes about the conversation, not all of it, but the parts that will not leave him. And he uses the correct words for the things he describes, which costs him something. The cost of accuracy when inaccuracy would be more comfortable. He writes the name Tariq. He did not know her brother's name until she said it under the China tree, and now he knows it, and knowing it has rearranged something in him. Not dramatically, but the way a single piece of information rearranges a picture you thought you understood. Suddenly the proportions are different, the weight of it sits differently. You see it more accurately, and accuracy is sometimes harder than ignorance. He writes, she said, that China is wise enough not to take sides. I have been thinking about this since I sat back down under that tree, which was 3 hours ago, and I am still thinking about it. I think she meant it about trees, and I think she also meant it as the truest thing she knows about surviving in this valley. That the things that survive here are the things that stop treating survival as a question of which side you're on, and start treating it as a question of simply remaining. The China remains. It does not win or lose. It remains. He writes, I think I am in something I cannot name. He crosses this out. He writes it again. He looks at it. He does not cross it out again. He leaves it on the page, visible through the canceled line. Both versions present. The denial and the acknowledgement existing in the same sentence, which is, he thinks, an accurate record of where he is. He closes the journal. He lies on the cot. He stares at the tent ceiling. Canvas, plain, unhelpful as a surface for thinking, which has never stopped anyone from thinking at it. The valley outside is entirely still. The mountains patient as they have always been patient. The lake receiving the moonlight with equanimity. The China grove standing in the dark exactly as it stood this afternoon, without urgency, without judgment, without taking sides. Its canopy holding the shape of everything that happened beneath it today and saying nothing about any of it. He thinks, tomorrow I will be sensible. He thinks, tomorrow she will be sensible. He thinks, the day after tomorrow we will both be sensible. He thinks, I am so tired of only being sensible. Breath. The valley holds its breath. The mountain night. The valley at this hour is a particular kind of silence. Not empty silence, not the silence of nothing, but full silence. The silence of a great many things being very still. The sleeping village, its houses dark except for 2 windows. The guarded camp, the checkpoint lights cold and weak against the dark. The soldiers at their posts doing what soldiers do at night, which is mostly waiting. The still lake. The Tao receiving the moonlight with the patience of something that has received a great many things over a great many centuries and has learned simply to hold them. The stream still running. Water doesn't stop for anything. Water is immune to the particular human need to pause and take stock. Water simply continues, which is its own kind of wisdom. A dog somewhere in the lower village making peace with the dark in the pragmatic way of dogs. The stars are extraordinary here. The city never manages this. The density, the depth of them, layer upon layer of light from distances so vast, they stopped being comprehensible the moment you tried to comprehend them. You don't try to comprehend them. You simply look. The valley has always been good at offering things that require you simply to look. The mountains going black and vast against the deep blue of the sky. The China Grove standing at the edge of the village exactly as it stood this afternoon, exactly as it stood 100 years ago, exactly as it stood through everything this valley has ever done to itself and had done to it. Its bark silver in the moonlight, its canopy enormous and still in the windless night. A single bird asleep somewhere in its upper branches, the bird she knows the name of in Kashmir, the one that called twice during the long silence in the herb garden and then went quiet. This valley has always held its secrets. It has held grief that no one wanted to keep and love that no one had permission to feel and hope that had no business surviving. And it has held all of these inside its mountains and its water and its impossible, unreasonable beauty, and it has not told. Pause. The valley knows what it has seen. It keeps what it knows in the way that only very old places can keep things, completely, without effort, without agenda. The mountains do not gossip. The lake does not judge. The China tree does not take sides. The China knows. It has always known. It was there before the conflict, and it will be there after. It stands in its grove at the edge of the village where a woman sketches on Wednesday afternoons, and a soldier sat where she didn't tell him not to sit, and it holds what happened there this afternoon. The words spoken and the words not spoken, the name said and the acknowledgement made, and the 12 feet of mountain grass that both of them maintained with such careful deliberateness. With the patient silence of something that is wise enough not to take sides. Don't stop here. Hit like, comment, and subscribe. Episode 3 is where the truth finally steps out of the shadows.